Welcome to the Breath of Life podcast. I'm Yulia. Here, we explore the world and our place in it through the lens of interconnectedness. If we could feel part of the living world, not just intellectually, but in our bones, if our breath could sync with the larger rhythm of life, how would that change the way we live, work, and make decisions? Join me for conversations with people who live and work from that place.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Breath of Life podcast. And today I'm very excited to be talking with Perdita Finn. I will let her introduce herself. But just to start off, I wanted to say that the topic that we're going to be discussing today, death and our relationship with death and the dead, has been really important to me for quite a while, because I think isn't it death that makes life what it is? And also, people are dying, the people we know, we care about, we love, but also people in the world, and finding a way to integrate death into our lives. I think this is important. I found Perdita's vision about doing that really, really inspiring. So thank you, Perdita.
Thank you, Yulia, for having me on. I'm really delighted to be here. My name is Perdita Finn. I'm the author of Take Back the Magic, Conversations with the Unseen World, and the forthcoming Mothers of Magic, Summoning the Wisdom of Our Ancestors. And, I often say that my teachers have been the dead themselves. Have been all those souls on the other side who've been reaching out to me, who are reaching out to all of us. And that my work is about learning to see with the eyes of the dead while I'm still alive. Because the dead have a very different perspective on life. And their perspective is very long and very generous and very intimate and very loving. And the more I see with the eyes of the dead, the more my heart breaks. But as my 4-year-old daughter once said to me, my daughter, when she was 4, said to me, "Mommy, our hearts break so bigger heart can grow in their place." Mm-hmm. And so our hearts do break when we begin to see with the eyes of the dead, but they also grow bigger.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting that when you were saying that, you were using words like warm and loving, things that are so rarely associated with dead or death.
Yeah, that's so right. One of the things that's really interesting to me is as modern people, modern civilized people, we sort of treat death like it's a mistake or an accident, a failure, a judgment. And yet if we look at the natural world, at the ecological world, every single thing dies. There's nothing that doesn't die. Some beings fail to be born, but no being fails to die. We all succeeded it. We all get an A+ at death, and we see that as somehow a mistake with the world. And yet we think of how we relate to sleep after a day. We long to get into bed. We long to shut our eyes. We long for the darkness. We long for that feeling when we awaken in the morning with a fresh breath and like, oh, life is renewed again. Sometimes we don't want to wake up. We want to sleep even more. We've loved that dream space. And I don't think that birth and death are any different than that. But the very real problem we face as civilized human beings is civilization's propaganda about death. And untangling that is part of my work, because what happened around 10,000 years ago, for a lot of very diffuse and entangled reasons, is instead of being hunter-gatherer peoples who walked, who migrated, who were in a constant state of cyclical relationship to the natural world, following the herds, following the seasons, following the moon, we began staying in one place. And instead of eating a diversity of foods that the earth might offer to us, we began to demand singular foods that we controlled. And those tended to be 4 particular grains. And, that even so much that there's one Harvard anthropologist who has posited that it was grains who domesticated us and have used us for their system of world domination. Because what happens when you start staying in one place and only eating one species is we made ourselves, 2 things happen. We became much more vulnerable to disease from domesticated animals. These crops, these monocrops depleted the soil, radically drew out all the nutrients from the soil. So we always needed more land. So you created, agriculture creates colonization. There's no difference between the two. And the other thing is that in the beginning, from the very beginning, civilization has only benefited the 1% at the very top of the hierarchy. And agricultural work, my son is a farmer, is backbreaking. You work from dawn to dusk, right? It's really hard. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors worked a couple hours a day. It was no big deal. So slavery becomes. So the outgrowth of agriculture is slavery and colonization. And those aren't byproducts of civilization. That is civilization. That is empire. From the beginning, from 10,000 years ago, from Babylon, from Ur, right down through Rome to hooray, America today. That's always been the mode. And what happened were 2 things grew up to keep those slaves in line. One was the police state, soldiers, armies, the force, the stick, and the other was religion. Religion as an idea of controlling people's idea. There's a better life waiting for you. Endure the suffering now, be obedient and good now, and good things will come later. And part of enforcing and creating these priesthoods and these religious indoctrinations was we had to separate people from the organic guidance of their ancestors. These were people who had prayed to their ancestors. They didn't have gods and goddesses, I don't think. They had the living and the dead. And they asked the dead for help with the work of living. And then they entered the realm of the dead, and then they returned. And just as the moon turned in cycles and the seasons turned in cycles, they knew their souls turned in cycles. So the grandmother who died knew she would be reborn as the salmon or the reindeer to feed her people. And those people knew that when they called themselves the salmon people or the reindeer people or the bear people, it was because literally they would be reborn as salmon and reindeer. We are eating grandmother. I am eating my wife. I am eating my children. I am eating my mother's. My mother is feeding me. My grandmother is feeding me. And I too will become food. And that is the ecological equation, which is a very generous one of knowing that everything that eats is eaten and everything comes back. Mm-hmm. And that eternal return is what civilization extinguishes. So instead of living in those generous circles, we start to live in very merciless straight lines of a single life. And in order to establish their authority, the priests all over the world, whether they were Buddhist or Hindu or Christian or whatever, or Jewish or whatever they were back in Ur and Babylon, they had to separate people from this organic guidance and wisdom. And to do that, they had to make them frightened of the dead. And we see in a lot of the earliest religious documents a need to separate, particularly the old women, from going to the graveyards and going to their ancestors and asking for their help. So that's why we have horror movies. That's, civilization wants to tell horror stories. You should be frightened of the haunted house. You should be frightened of the little girl haunting the mental asylum or the crazy little killer. I'm not frightened of the dead. They're dead. They can't hurt me. I'm terrified of the living. The living actively hurt the living. Civilized human beings. I always say, put me in a haunted house, put me in a boardroom filled with reasonable men, and I will be terrified.
I guess also what you're describing, this web of interrelationships. For example, I started a wilderness education program. And when you spend a week in the forest, you just see how everything, it's a cycle. And suddenly you don't need to learn anything or read books. You just understand how things work.
And this was our ancestors. Wisdom comes from our intimacy with the ecological world, right? Right now I have a 24-year-old cat, and she's upstairs. She's stopped eating. This is her time to go, right? Like, I mean, she's had a really good long run.
Right.
And she's sitting there. She's just decided no more food. And she keeps trying to get outside. And the reason she keeps trying to get outside, I live in the mountains, is she wants to go out and offer her body up,
Mm.
to the animals. And I wish I had a more relaxed relationship that I could let her do that and just let her go. I'm having a hard time. Um, but I mean, that's what we would have done, right? That's what we would have done. Saint Francis, when he was dying, begged his monks to take him outside and lay him naked on the earth, that he wanted to return to his mother, right? Give
Yeah.
my body back.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't, of course, just like I'm not doing it with my cat.
Yeah. And how did you come into this topic?
There's so many origin stories, aren't there? And we can always pick a different point of origin. And if we live our lives in a circle, where's the beginning of a circle? It could be anywhere. I could begin the story anywhere. Astrologers will tell you that, all of my planets are in the 8th house of death. I can tell you, I've been having dreams of the dead my whole life. But where it became conscious for me was as a young mother. And I felt overwhelmed and burdened. And I isolated, as women are in our culture, particularly in America. And my own mother was demented and living with us. I was caring not only for 2 toddlers, but also an elder, and working full time at home and pulling out my hair. And I began calling on the dead for help. Why did I know to do that? I can't tell you. But I started to ask people I knew on the other side for help. Old teachers, old friends, grandmothers, neighbors, aunts and uncles, anyone on the other side when I needed help. And I began to experience them, not as speaking to me or showing up in my life, but as helping me. They began to show up in my life, and they began to be helpful. It worked, so I continued to play with it. And now as you look behind me, you'll see that I have an ancestor wall filled with pictures of my ancestors that I begin every morning, and I have for many, many decades now, enumerating my troubles, anxieties, and worries and turning them all over to someone on the other side. And I experience them as showing up to help me. All my work has been about teaching people to do just that. We are not alone. We have more helpers than we know.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds a little bit counterintuitive. I started reading your book, Bring Back the Magic, and I read the story about your son on the train. That was a wonderful story, but it sent me into this asking dead for help.
Well, that's the very thing that civilization doesn't want you to do, because it wants you to rely on an economy of money, which keeps you obedient and compliant, rather than an economy of prayer, which makes you empowered and feral.
Yeah.
I don't really worry so much about the economy of money as much as I used to. I mean, we all do, right? Because we live in it. But I know that the dead are very generous. And our ancestors, our hunter-gatherer ancestors, lived in an economy of prayer. They prayed to their ancestors to help them find food. Help me find the herd. Show me where the berries are. Help me catch a fish. Show me where to sleep tonight. Bring us together with another clan of other people so I can meet somebody to have children with. You know what I mean? Like, they prayed for everything. And the land held the stories of their ancestors. So you came to a tree or a river or a stone, and you remembered the stories of your great, 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 great grandparents going back 10,000 years. And you told those stories. We know this is true because of the Aboriginal people in Australia who have what they call the songlines, which are nothing but the stories of their ancestors that are attached to various places on the land. And some of those stories have been shown to be 50, 60,000 years old. What would it be like to walk across the land and know with each footstep you were putting your foot atop a story of your ancestors who were there to answer the prayers, and to hold you up, we would feel such a sense of belonging.
Yes, exactly. I actually started this notebook with the name of dead people in my life.
Very good.
It started with whatever 10 names, but as I was writing, I was just bringing so many memories of people that have made my life what it is. And also, there was this feeling of gratitude, and making space for something that.
What you're doing with making the names and collecting the names, that's the place I always tell people to begin this work. You know more people on the other side than you think you do, right?
The reason, I guess, behind seeking something about death is because some really dear people have died in my life, and I just want to understand how to make this part of my life and not keep it in the darkness. I was finding out that as I was saying their names, I was creating more space for them to be there, and for these parts of me that were in the darkness to also be lit up somehow.
You know, the oldest mantras involve two things: a greeting of some kind and the name of the ancestor, whether it's Om Namah Shivaya or Ave Maria, Grazie Plena. You know, hail, hey you. You know, we want to call on we know from our oldest fairy tales that the dead love to hear their names said aloud. Sometimes a psychic friend and I walk through the graveyard just saying the names aloud on all the gravestones.
Wow.
To say that we see you, remember you. And what's really interesting to me is we don't know how we're connected to the dead. You know, some people talk about ancestors, and I use the word the dead, not ancestors, because I want to go beyond mere biology and human identification. I have more lives than I know, and I have more mothers than I know. I've been men and women and probably a few of the 36 different genders of fungi. I have been a hero, I've been a villain, I've been a plant, I've been an animal. And I have mothers who've loved me from all those lives. And I don't know who or where they are now. So I have to trust the dead who show up for me. Sometimes very surprising ancestors show up, and I don't know how they're connected, but they weave us together and create. It's not that there's one side of the veil and another side of the veil. The veil is woven from our souls, entangled with each other, like the mycelial threads that create the fabric of the soil. And so, you know, you start. I always often tell the story. I give an example of I was taking my daughter to a doctor's appointment during COVID, and she has a very difficult genetic disorder, and it's taught me a lot about prayer. And I was not going to be able to be in the doctor's office with her, and that concerned me. And so I was calling on all the doctors I knew to be there with her. She'd have a good doctor's visits. And out of the blue, I remembered a man in my little town growing up who had made the ice cream in our community. He had an ice cream parlor, and it was the best ice cream in the whole world. And every day he would post the flavors he had made the night before, and people around town would say, oh, he made strawberry ice, oh, he made blueberry, he made ginger. You know, everybody would run. But he was a horrible man, and he hated being an ice cream man. And he had a group of women, of young women who worked for him that he just tortured. And it turned out he had wanted to be a doctor, and his father wouldn't let him. He made him take over the family business of making ice cream. So he ran his ice cream parlor like an operating room. And he yelled at the girls working for him like he was the surgeon. I thought, Vigo, Mr. Peterson, you can be on my daughter's medical team. Bring some sweetness to her doctor's visit. So my daughter went to her doctor's visit. She came out, she said, Mom, that was the best doctor's visit I've ever had. She said, I'm doing great. She said, I'm doing everything right. I love her. Let's keep her on the team. All good, right? Terrific, easy. Answered prayer. But I came home and I told the story to a group of people I was teaching from around the world. Just to say, look, you can call in anyone. You know, somebody pops into your head for a reason. You don't know why. You ask them for help. They will offer. The dead are very generous. And a woman from Toronto, Canada said, not Vigo Peterson from Marion, Massachusetts. My town had 1,000 people on it. I said, yes. She said, I said, did you know Mr. Peterson? She said, no, but my sister did. She spent a summer as a teenager working for him.
Mm.
And it was the worst. Yeah, it was the worst summer of her life. He tortured her. She was in tears every night. It was horrible. And she said, do you think I could tell her your story? I said, of course, share this. The dead want their stories told.
Mm.
Her sister was suffering from stage 4 metastasized breast cancer.
Mm.
And she told her sister the story. And her sister said, well, that guy owes me. I'm going to pray to him that he puts me in remission. And he did.
Oh, wow.
And that was a real miracle. And it was a miracle of healing, because what the dead frequently want is, I'm sure Mr. Peterson, when he died, thought, oh my God, I've made those poor girls' lives a living hell. I had all these lovely young girls working for me. We could have had so much fun together. And instead, I took out all my fury on them. I wish I could make amends to them. We don't know how we're connected to each other. And one of the amazing things that I do in my workshops frequently is we begin to share the dead with each other, and we begin to discover all kinds of ways our dead show up for each other, for us, people we never met in life.
The question I was going to ask, what do you mean by showing up? But now I understand. So showing up is showing up somehow in your thoughts or through others' words, because they have found their way to somehow be of help to you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this work is about beginning to trust your own intuition. And civilization has tried to give us blinders about our own intuition, our gut sense. And, I was sitting, in the car with my daughter, and Mr. Peterson popped into my thoughts for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
But it was for a reason. And I paid attention to the fact. These random stray thoughts, we begin to hone our intuition. The more we work with the dead, the more we will become centered in our own intuition. And one of the things I often find is the more I begin to see with the eyes of the dead and trust them, the more empowered I become in my own life to trust myself. And I often see with my students, they become more creative, they become more active, they have more agency, they're doing more of what they want to do because they don't feel alone, and they don't trust that still small voice within them.
Going back a little bit, what is death to you?
Well, here I have on my lap a 24-year-old cat, right?
What's her name, by the way?
Her name is Fujiyama.
Oh, Fujiyama.
Yama is the god of, the goddess of death. And Fujiyama, Mount Fujiyama, and she's 24. I found her as a wild kitten, a feral kitten, very little. And they say in human years, like she's 138. She's really had a good run. And I don't want to say goodbye, Yulia. I adore her. I love her. She remembers my children when they were little. She's been here a long time. She's been a good friend to me. She shared mothering with me of these kids. When my daughter was sick in the beginning, she used to catch mice for her and disembowel them and bring her kidneys and livers and hearts. She'd look at me like, you're not feeding her the right things.
Exactly, yeah.
I'll feed her the right things. So she's very special to me. But she's going to die sometime in the next week, I think. And my heart's going to break. And then I'm going to open my eyes. I'm going to pray for her for 49 days, which is traditional all over the world, interestingly, a period of liminal in-between time for a soul. And then I'm going to see where she comes back. I don't have grandchildren yet, Yulia. And you know what I keep telling this little girl? When I got her, my daughter was 8 years old, and she dressed her up in all kinds of little outfits. We have the funniest pictures of her all dressed up in little outfits. She kept turning her into a little princess. And I keep saying, why don't you be my first granddaughter? Wouldn't that be fun? I've had the experience, right? Wouldn't that be lovely? I mean, she'll be hell on wheels, actually, but I'll know how to deal with her. I think she and I'd have fun that way. And then maybe she'll be my mother in my next life. Maybe she's my mother in my next life. I don't know how the story is going to unfold, or she's my best friend when I'm a little girl in my next life. I don't know. It's all a mystery, but love isn't a mystery. What I do know is that you're going to have to say goodbye, and I'm going to have to say goodbye to you, and we're going to say hello to each other again.
I think makes such a difference how we are saying our goodbyes to.
Well, and also, you know, a woman in our community passed away recently in my Way of the Rose community. And I said to her, what prayer do you want me to hold for you for your next life?
Mm-hmm.
What am I praying for you? Not that you be dropped in some conveyor belt into a bin of heaven or a bin of hell, but what prayers do you need? Where are you going to come in on your lips with and in your heart in your next life that I can hold for you? So I'll give you an example. My father, who I write about in Take Back the Magic, he was the son of Irish immigrants, the eldest son. And there, you know, he went to college, the first person to go to college. And for these kids, you had to make money. You had to be a success. You had two options. You could be a doctor or a lawyer. There weren't any other choices. And my father was a poet. And he was recognized by a poet in college who wrote poetry with him and tried to encourage him to, you know, do a PhD or write a book. But my father went to medical school and he had to get married and support a family and, you know, all of that. And his resentment was profound. He was so angry. He was a very good doctor, but a very angry man. And ultimately, you know, he had some fantasy that he would retire and then he would write, and that didn't happen. And he made a mess of everything in his life, it seemed. But when I think of a young man who would now be 14 or 15 years old, reborn, and I imagine that young man, I hope he was raised by parents who surrounded him with books. I hope he was raised by parents who recognized his desire to do something with literature, maybe to be a professor or a teacher or a writer or an artist. And I think about my father who knew so much about anatomy, who knew so much about the human body as a small town doctor, who knew so much about the earth as a sailor, who taught himself to navigate by the stars. And I think I send that young man blessings. I often in the morning will say to him, I hope you feel blessings today, and you can't imagine where they come from. But they come from someone who loved you in another life, who wishes you only well in this life.
Mm-hmm. So your father and this ice cream maker. So the story is that when you are not aligned with your true nature or with purpose.
I worry about the word aligned. We use that word aligned a lot these days, right? Aligned. People talk about alignment and bringing alignment and being aligned. And I always get scared about straight lines because we don't have straight lines in nature. We only have twists and turns and circles and spirals. Mm-hmm. Straight lines are something plows make. Straight lines are something human beings impose on the circularity of the world. So rivers don't go in straight lines. They meander and they twist and they turn. So what does it mean to be in alignment with the river? What is it? It means to be in the currents. It means you don't know where you're going. You think you're going backwards and you're really going forwards. If you've ever walked a labyrinth, I don't know if you've ever walked a labyrinth. It's a marvelous spiritual exercise because you're twisting and turning and you're headed towards the center. And sometimes you're close and sometimes you're far. It's like a maze, a mystery. To live inside the long story of our souls, we live inside a mystery, an unfathomable mystery. The lives that we've lived before are mostly a mystery to us. The lives that lie ahead of us are mostly a mystery to us. We often don't know what we're looking at when we look at a single life. We see lives of abjection and failure, and we don't know what we're looking at. So, for instance, my best friend's mother growing up, she was a beautiful woman, very talented. She's a physical therapist. And she was also, unfortunately, a very severe alcoholic. And she experienced a lot of trauma in her marriage and in her life. And she really surrendered to alcoholism. And people used to say about her, when she hits bottom, she'll get sober. Well, Bottom was dying at age 54 in a tenement apartment surrounded by broken vodka bottles. Okay, that was Bottom. And she died. Life was a mess, a failure. Never saw her grandchildren. But when I wanted to get sober from sugar, which is my personal addiction, I thought, Rita, to see my grandchildren. I don't want to surrender. I want to get sober. Who better to help me get sober than the woman who couldn't? And I began praying to her. And she shows up for me every day. I've been sober for 3.5 years now from all sugars. And I really credit Rita with it. You take a Mozart. Mozart is born at 4 years old. He's writing concertos and symphonies, right? But how many lives came before that life? How many lives where he was just plonking away at the piano forte? How many lives was he a songbird? How many lives did he live silenced? How many lives did he live singing out of tune? We have forgotten that failure is often a great teacher. And great failures can be great teachers. When I talk to people about working with the dead, they often say to me, how do I know who to ask for help? I say, look at something somebody was really good at. If they were a really good doctor in life, maybe they're still a good doctor. Call on them for help. My father, he's a good doctor. But also look at their failures. Because the person who failed or was frustrated or terrible at something has learned a great deal about it. The person who didn't get what they want. I now make my father, for all of his grandchildren, the patron saint of making a living at the arts, because that's what he wanted to be. He didn't think he could do that. He didn't think you could make a living at the arts. So my father gets me book deals and royalties, and you know what I mean? And my brother was very concerned about his son who wanted to be a jazz bassist. And he was like, oh, I'll never make a living as a jazz bassist. It's a terrible profession. Oh, is it? He's on tour all over the world now. He's doing great. And I always tell him, I put Grandpa Matt with you. He's going to make sure you make a living at the arts.
And what a beautiful way also to honor, I guess, their deep desires and things that they held. Really.
The word is desire. When we know what we want, and maybe the word is that the alignment is like two magnets coming together. You know, when our heart connects to the heart of the dead, the hearts of the living and the hearts of the dead connect, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Something that you said about Fujiyama was really interesting, that you're going to be praying for her 49 days and then there are rituals. This is one of the things that is really missing, because having a ritual creates a sense of peace and allows you to say goodbye, start another chapter, or be with the dead.
Yeah, we've lost all our rituals. Well, one of the things is people used to die at home, and somebody was always dying at home. There was always an old aunt upstairs or an old grandmother dying at home in the house, right? Children died. People died. Death wasn't a mysterious event that happened far off at a hospital or a nursing home. Death was happening all around. Everybody knew, every mother had lost a child. Many children died before age 5. It was not a surprise, and babies were born at home. And if you've ever sat with the dying, you know that death and birth look a lot alike. Fuji's not actively dying right now. She's shutting down. But I know there'll come a moment, because I've had lots of animals, where they labor. It's hard work. But then the dead would have been buried close. We would have buried them in our backyards. We would have buried them in the village cemetery. We would have passed their graves every day. The memento mori, the memory of death, was there. We knew it. And so we also had better rituals for saying goodbye, right? Like, people wear black to say, someone I know love has died. Please know that I'm dealing with grief. They wear black armbands, right? I think that's great. A student of mine has studied grief singing from all over the world and teaches workshops on it. Oh gosh, it's amazing. And she will teach you how to make sounds. We talk about somatic healing, but how do we make sounds to express our grief and really get in touch with to wail and cry? You know what I mean? This little being who's been with me for 24 years deserves some grief singing at the end. You know what I mean? Like, my heart's going to break. And And I think we feel so traumatized. We talk about trauma a lot as modern people because we don't have any of these natural somatic ways of processing grief. I have another cat upstairs. I love animals. And her brother died. He was hit by a car, and it was horrible. And we brought his body inside. And for 24 hours, she walked around the perimeter of the house screaming.
No.
It was a horrible noise. But I thought, wow, that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to walk through town, tearing our clothes, screaming. I mean, look at the horrors in the world today, right?
Exactly. And you cannot be holding it in, because if you are,
No,
it just accumulates inside of you.
right? Right.
Yeah.
And old women used to know how to do these things. I mean, these were the arts of the old women.
Well, now as you're saying this, I'm also remembering that when my grandmother died, and it was in Russia, it was 30 years ago, and people were wearing black bands, and there was a group of women who were wailing in the room the whole night with the casket.
That's what's right.
Yeah.
That and it's a way of letting the grief move through us, alchemize us, transform us, open us up. If that heart's breaking and a new heart is growing in its place, we got to express it.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. And if the way that it is now, that we are trying to push death and the dead away, what are some of the consequences that maybe we're not aware of that we're experiencing?
We're in the middle of the sixth greatest extinction of all life on this planet, Yulia. We've brought the whole world to the brink of extinction.
So you think
Because
of this loss of the connection to the dead?
yeah, we've forgotten that all beings have been our mothers. And look at every aspect of our lives is insane, right? It's insane. Because we think we only have one life to get it right. Look at all these billionaires and oligarchs around the world. They think they've only got one life to get it right. So they've got to grab as much money, as many women, as much gold, as big a yacht as they can so they can win. Win what? Win what? You know what I mean? What do you think? And look at we bomb other people's, and we forget that the people we're bombing are our children from other lives, that the people we're bombing are our mothers from our next lives. We forget that the places we are bombing are the places we are going to be reborn. What would the world look like if we really knew in our bones we were coming back?
Mm-hmm.
How would we live if we knew we were coming back? How would we treat each other differently, I think?
So how do you feel into that interconnectedness? To me, reading about it or hearing about it or having it as pure cognitive knowledge passed on to you, it doesn't really do much.
Well, I begin every morning with worries and problems, and I turn them over to the dead because I figure they've got a better plan than I do. I don't have to think up a solution, they do. I give it to them. But I'll give you a real example. I have a mountain. I live in the mountains, the Catskill Mountains. They're old mountains, mossy, dark, filled with water and streams. And I have a mountain behind me, Mount Guardian, and I love to climb her almost every day. And I climb her so often. And as I do, I say the names out loud of the dead that I know. Each step, another person I know and remember. I go through my childhood, through my life, teachers, friends, neighbors, ancestors, saying their names, walking through the forest, listening to the owls, seeing the salamanders, the mountain laurel in bloom, or the leaves falling, whatever it is. There I am on my mountain. That's my lived practice. But this winter I got very sick. I was I got very, very ill. I got pneumonia that I didn't realize was a pneumonia, and I went septic, which is very dangerous, and very high fevers, and they put me in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I was so sick I couldn't think. You can't when that you're hurting that much and you're that feverish. And I was just assaulted by the horrors of the world. Suddenly I could see all the horrors around the world, the genocides, the mass graves, the children brutally murdered around the world, and feeling just the horror of everything. It was sort of coming in on me. I thought, how do I get through this? And I heard the mountain say to me in my feverish state, walk with me, walk on my body. So I began in my imagination walking up the mountain I had literally walked up every day, step by step, calling on the names of the dead. And I got to the top of the mountain with all of the dead, and I began to come down, and she said, come into my body. I just felt her take me into her body. The roots, the hibernating animals, it was January, the crystals and the stones, and my fever broke. When I work with people doing this work with the dead, what happens is they begin to have faith in the dead. They begin to have faith in the other side, faith in their mothers from all their past lives, faith in the earth, to trust the earth. And the more faith we have, the less fear. Fear is what makes us hateful and violent. Faith is what makes us loving and generous. So how we transform fear into faith in a daily way is what's important to me. Help people do that.
Mm-hmm. So what are some ways that people can start developing this relationship and transforming?
Simplest way I would say is start small. We get so grandiose as human beings. Start really, really small. And ask for help. That's really hard. That's the hardest part of this work, is asking for help, because we don't want to ask for help. Mm-hmm. And we want to assume we have control of the situation, right? But look where you don't feel like you have control and ask. Maybe you want to get a human being on the telephone on the other end of the line. Maybe you're anxious about a doctor's visit or a medical test you have. Maybe you're worried about a child. Maybe you're worried about your car. Maybe you're trying to get a parking space. I don't know. Keep it small, a worry, and give it to someone you trust on the other side to solve for you, and see what happens. The dead will be your teachers. The dead will show you they are really there.
Usually you say a prayer loudly, or are there any specifics?
Well, there are lots of, here's the way I liken it, Yulia. One is that, like, if you want to make bread, all you need is flour and water and some yeast, put them together and you're going to make bread, right? There, I've told you how to make bread. Mm-hmm. But a lot of us go to bread making school. Because there's some refinements. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that all you need to make magic with the dead is take your problem, give it to someone on the other side, and magic will happen. Mm-hmm. I have told you the sum total of my teaching. If you want to learn how to bake a really good sourdough and get a crispy crust and maybe even make a croissant or two, I teach a lot of workshops. I offer monthly conversations. I've written a lot of books. I have an active Substack. And I want to try to create communities of these conversations about how do we work with really intractable problems? What do we do? Who can we call on? How do we put teams of the dead together to solve really big problems in our lives? How do we deal when the answers to our prayer come in ways that we don't like? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of conversations. And so what's really important that I want to do is to try to create and shift our belief sphere around working with the dead and bring people together to talk about all this. I teach a year-long course called A Year of Living with the Dead, where week by week we do this work together. I offer through my Substack a monthly magic conversation where people show up and talk about what's been happening with them as they do this work and share experience. So the more we do it and the more we talk about it, the better we get at doing it. I don't think there's a formula, though. I don't think you can do it wrong. And that's the most important thing I want to tell you. The dead love you. The dead remember that we have all been each other's mothers. And they're really loving. All the dead are really loving. So you can't screw this up. Mm-hmm. You can't. And religion has made us think like, I have to be worthy to ask for help. I have to be a good person to ask for help. No, no, you don't.
That is interesting. Was probably the Orthodox Christian in me speaking. So how do you do
Yes.
this? Because in Orthodox Christianity, you better behave. You better follow the rules.
But it's all part of, but here's the thing: Orthodox Christianity or Orthodox Judaism or Orthodox Hinduism or Orthodox Buddhism, all of it is designed to get you compliant, to be a servant of the fascist state, a servant of empire. And what I'm inviting everyone to do is to rewild their spiritual selves and to say that your desires are valid. Your heart is good. You are loved no matter what. You are unconditionally loved by the dead. What do you want? So the first thing that people is, what do you want truly, madly, and deeply? What do you want so much that you would pray for it for lifetimes? And what do people want? They want health. They want family. They want belonging. They want love.
Yeah.
You know, it's what we all want, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been a beautiful conversation, being mindful of the time. I was going to ask how people can experience your work.
I'm not sure when this podcast is going to air, but I am teaching with a 7-week course with the Shift Network. Go to the Shift Network, Perdita Finn. I'm offering a 1-day workshop introduction to my work in October. You can find out about all my workshops, the Shift one, the 1-day workshop, at takebackthemagic.com. All of my upcoming works, I'm doing a workshop in person here on the East Coast of the United States. I'm also offering on Zoom a year-long course of working with the dead. And again, I have a Substack, Take Back the Magic. And as part of my paid Substack, I have a monthly gathering, the third Sunday of every month. And people come from all over the world, and it's really fun. And they have lots of wonderful stories to share about how this really has changed their lives.
Yeah, it's so liberating to be able to share, to talk about the death, which is not an easy thing to do.
It isn't. And you know, I love Joan of Arc. She's one of my favorite saints. But she's not really a saint. You know, the Catholic Church tried to appropriate her 600 years after they murdered her and burned her alive. And we forget that it was the church itself who killed her. She's the only saint they ever killed. But what made this 17-year-old peasant girl the youngest general in human history? What made her get this 17-year-old illiterate peasant girl got all of these literate, powerful men to do what she said, to give her an army? You know, how did she do it? She talked to the dead. The place where she went in her village, the beech tree where she went and began to hear her counsel, was where people gathered to consult with their ancestors. So she was consulting with her ancestors. She was talking to the dead, and they were showing her that she could do anything. Oh, you've never been on a horse before? We'll show you how to ride a horse. Oh, you've never held on a sword before? We'll teach you how to sword fight. And they did. And she was indomitable. And what I often say about this is, this work makes me very joyous. It also makes me fearless. It also makes me a little dangerous in a fun way. Because you know you've got more help than people know.
Yeah, exactly. And even from little bits that I've been doing since I found out about your work, it really feels like more space and more light. Because like if you cannot integrate them into your life, if I cannot talk about them with my children, with other people, with friends, maybe I'm not feeling whole. Maybe that's one part of the reason why people do not feel whole.
Well, we're so lonely as modern people, aren't we? We're lonely. We're disconnected from the earth. We're disconnected, you know, to walk through the earth and feel the trees as your literal mothers, to feel the animals and the owls showing up. You know, the night my daughter got diagnosed with her condition, it's a very serious genetic condition. And it was a January night, and it was very overwhelming news. Like, we had hoped for a diagnosis that would give us an answer, a treatment, and not an answer that would give us a verdict. And so she and I went for a walk outside under the stars on a road, you know, through the forest. And at one point, an owl swooped in front of us and landed right in front of us and just stared at us. And we both started to cry and hold each other. And we got down on our knees in front of the owl. And it didn't go anywhere. It was January. It was really cold. And we waited there for like 5 minutes. And eventually we got up and turned around and began to walk in the other direction. And the owl swooped up and wrapped its wings around my daughter. And so one of the things that I say to people is you begin to call on the dead. The magic that begins to happen in your life is real. It's not some made up hoo-ha. It's the owls know you will recognize them as your mother, and they will show up and be your mother when you need a mother. So will the mountain, so will the dirt, so will the flowers, so will the bats, so will everything that's alive.
Yeah, I've experienced some of that with plants.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you again, Perdita, for making the time. It was a beautiful conversation, and I hope that more people are able to open their hearts, their memories to the dead, the reason why we're here today.
Yeah. It would be horrible to never be able to go to sleep and dream.
Yeah.
I mean, but there are lots of mysteries too in this work, and I work with mothers who've lost children, which is very hard mysteries indeed, right? Also, I'm putting together a new book on abortion, soul appointments. How do we say yes to a soul and no to a body? You know what I mean? There are a lot of mysteries. And we can work with them all.
And also appreciate the mysteries as opposed to having to get to this clarity, to understanding, because life is a mystery.
Exactly. I say my only religious tenet is I don't really know. I don't know much. But the dead know a lot. Thank you, Yulia, so much. It's so lovely to meet you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The Breath of Life. It means a lot to me. If something in this conversation touched you, consider sharing it with someone and connecting in the process. Follow The Breath of Life for new episodes and join me on Substack, where I publish my weekly writings. The link is in the show notes. Till next time.